Good afternoon, Saturday, September 27th. I'm Yumna Naufal. These are today's headlines. Lebanon's Prime Minister Tamam Salam says the international community must share the enormous burden of the Syrian refugee crisis. This is at the United Nations meeting in New York. Qaeda Syria affiliate النشرة calls on the Lebanese authorities to discuss its terms for the release of the police taken captive, also accusing Hezbollah of impeding negotiations. And UK lawmakers vote to back British participation in the US-led coalition airstrikes against Islamic State militants in Iraq. Lebanon's Prime Minister Tamam Salam said that the international community must share the enormous burden of the Syrian refugee crisis at a United Nations meeting in New York. More than 1.17 million refugees from Syria's civil war next door have registered in the country, accounting for 1/4 of its population and exacerbating a severe water shortage. The influx is expected to reach 1.5 million by the end of this year. Lebanese authorities are acknowledging the crisis, with the Prime Minister saying that the country faces political and economic collapse as the number of refugees threaten to exceed 1/3 of the population.
Lebanon, however, has received far less assistance than it needs. As long as the region is aflame and the war in Syria continues, the rights and safety of refugees in Lebanon must be respected in accordance with international humanitarian norms. But the strains on Lebanon will remain immense, and the burden it is bearing must be shared.
Despite all that, the problem of the displaced Syrians is evolving on such a multifaceted course that traditional solutions can no longer help. The time has come to resort to a variety of simultaneous and converging policies. Lebanese authorities will be tightening border controls and applying strict rules to obtain an exact tally and to define who may qualify to remain in Lebanon as a refugee. It is of the utmost importance that assistance to host communities be expanded and funneled through official delivery channels. Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, it is now evident that there is no effective alleviation of this issue without serious burden sharing, as we have requested on several occasions. That is by the relocation of significant numbers of refugees in third countries in a collective commitment by the international community. All such measures are meant to help diminish the pressure and risk for Lebanon, recognizing, however, that the true solution will only emanate from a permanent cessation of hostilities leading to a political settlement in Syria.
Contributions to Lebanon's security and stability are essential, but the most critical tasks fall on Lebanon's leaders themselves. The Lebanese people need them to elect a president, and to do it now. The men and women who make sacrifices every day for their country in Lebanon's security forces deserve to have the political backing that only a fully empowered president and cabinet can provide. Upholding the spirit of the National Pact as well as the letter of the Constitution requires the election of a new president. The new president will be charged with protecting the best interests of the Lebanese people, which include respecting Lebanese sovereignty and upholding the Babda Declaration of Disassociation. The Lebanese people can count on the support of partners across the region and across the world, as well as from the United Nations and multiple Security Council resolutions. Ultimately, Lebanon's most pressing political challenges can only be met by the Lebanese themselves. But the United States will continue to stand with you every step of the way, working together to realize the promise of a free, democratic, and secure Lebanon.
Al-Qaeda Syria affiliate al-Nusra Front is calling on Lebanese authorities to discuss its terms for the release of troops and police taken captive last month, and is also accusing Hezbollah of impeding the negotiations. Al-Nusra Front has already killed one of the hostages who were captured in fighting in the town of Arsel near the Syrian border. Jihadists of the Islamic State group beheaded the other two. In a video posted on YouTube, al-Nusra accused Lebanese authorities of allowing Hezbollah, which has been heavily involved in the civil war in Syria, to block negotiations for the soldiers' release. Hezbollah is causing all attempts to negotiate the release of the Lebanese hostages to fail, the video is charging. النشرة is previously demanding that in return for the release, Hezbollah end its intervention in Syria on the side of President Bashar al-Assad. UK lawmakers have voted to back British participation in a US-led coalition airstrikes against Islamic State militants in Iraq. After a 7-hour debate, MPs voted for a military action by 5-4 votes to 43. Britain is expected to deploy Tornado fighters, a handful of which are in Cyprus and within striking distance of northern Iraq. The British resolution does not address any action in Syria, though many lawmakers tried to push the government to admit that taking on militants there would be the likely next step. No European nation has yet agreed to strike in Syria. The US-led coalition began its aerial campaign against Islamic State fighters in Syria earlier on Tuesday, aiming to roll back and ultimately crush the extremist group that has created a pro-state spanning the Syrian-Iraqi border. Coming up next, celebrities, paparazzi, and the world's media gather in Venice for the widely anticipated George Clooney wedding. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching the 4:20 o'clock news on Future TV. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu is calling for a political transformation in Syria to end the civil war in the country. He says as long as the Assad regime stays, they cannot talk about bringing stability and security to the region. He was at the United Nations General Assembly in New York, and he also said that the Islamic militants need to be defeated in order to bring on stability and peace in the region.
The situation in Syria is getting worse and worse. On the one side, the regime continues to oppress the legitimate expectation of its own people, and the regime has killed more than 200,000 people in Syria. And ISIL and the other terrorist groups are also playing very negative role to destabilize Syria. And therefore, we need a comprehensive program to overcome, first of all, to defeat the terror and the terrorists in the region, to bring the stability and the peace in the region, and also to deal the humanitarian aspects or consequences of this situation. And we see Iraq and Syria as one single picture. And we welcome the political transformation in Iraq, more inclusive government. We are fully supporting, and we need the same type of political transformation in Syria as well.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry reaffirms the United States' deep commitment to Asia, saying the U.S. wants to remain front and center in the region during an address at the U.S.-Asian Ministerial meeting in New York. Kerry said he hoped the group would discuss cooperation on global issues, including the threat of foreign fighters traveling to the Middle East to join the Islamic State group and the challenge of containing the Ebola virus in West Africa. He also met with EU Foreign Policy Chief Catherine Ashton and Iranian Foreign Minister Jawad Zarif. Talks between experts from the P5+1 and Iran have been held on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly's ministerial meetings, but an expected meeting of foreign ministers was called off on Friday. And so Iran's president says that progress so far in nuclear talks with 6 major powers has not been significant, and the pace must be sped up if the November 24th deadline for a final agreement is to be reached. Hassan Rouhani told a news conference that Iran will never accept any agreement that requires it to stop enriching uranium, and that sanctions by the U.S., the European Union, and the United Nations must be melted away. Talks between experts from the 6 powers and Iran have been held on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly's ministerial meeting, but of course the expected meeting of foreign ministers was called off. France's Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius said the reason was a lack of significant advances. Thousands of doses of experimental Ebola vaccines should be available in the coming months, according to the World Health Organization, and could eventually be given to healthcare workers and other people who have had contact with the sickness. The announcement was made on Friday at a news briefing in Geneva by Marie-Paul Kieny, the Assistant Director General at WHO. She said no vaccine has yet been proven safe or effective in humans, but some testing was underway.
We are working at WHO with many partners to try to accelerate 3 types of products. One are drugs, medicine. The other one are blood-derived products, either whole blood or plasma. And the third one is on vaccines. So on drugs, we have had some work with experts to look at which are the products which are the nearest to having proven some utility potentially for Ebola, and we are focusing on these. WHO has released guidelines for the safe use of whole blood transfusion to treat Ebola patients, and we are working with many partners to help put in the affected countries material that would allow this country to do plasmapheresis in order to extract plasma from recovered patients, convalescent patients, in order to be able to prepare then serum and to treat further patients in the country. In terms of vaccines, there are several candidates, but we are focusing in WHO mainly on two. One which is based on what is called chimpanzee adenovirus, which is a recombinant virus vector. This is developed by the company GSK. The other one is based on another virus, which is called VSV, and it's developed by a company in the US called New Link.
A man fired from an Oklahoma food processing plant beheaded a woman with a knife and was attacking another worker when he was shot and wounded by a company official, according to police in the United States. More police sergeant Jeremy Lewis said police are waiting until Alton Nolan, who's 30, is conscious to arrest him in Thursday attack. He severed the head of Colleen Hufford, 54, then stabbed Tracy Johnson, 43, a number of times before Mark Vaughan, a reserve sheriff's deputy and the company's chief operating officer, shot him. Lewis said more police have asked the Federal Bureau of Investigation to look into the man's background because of the nature of the attack, which follows a series of videotaped beheadings by Islamic State militants. Now, a law enforcement official familiar with the investigation said that while there was an indication that Nolan was a Muslim convert and was trying to convert others to Islam. Actor George Clooney and his fiancée Amal Alameddine have arrived in Venice for their weekend wedding extravaganza. A clutch of photographers was on hand to record the couple's arrival at the Tronchetto terminal, where they were picked up by Clooney's regular water taxi driver and taken to the luxury hotel Cipriani. The couple's civil ceremony is expected to take place at the Venice City Hall in the Palazzo Cavalli on the Grand Canal near the famous Rialto Bridge. Clooney is 53 and Alameddine is 36. They have not publicly divulged the details of the celebrations, although the area along the famed Grand Canal will be closed on Monday by order of Venice city officials. Media have speculated the couple will have two ceremonies, one today, followed by a civil service on Monday. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our top stories. Lebanon's Prime Minister Tamam Salam says international community must share the enormous burden of the Syrian refugee crisis. This was at the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Al-Qaeda Syria affiliate, the Nusra Front, is calling on Lebanese authorities to discuss the terms of release of the police taken captive in Al-Sayed, accusing Hezbollah of impeding the negotiations. And UK lawmakers vote to back British participation in the US-led coalition airstrikes against the Islamic State militants in Iraq. Those are your Saturday headlines live on Future Television. Stay tuned for Nour Ael with the French Bulletin. I'll be back tomorrow at 4:20 for all the latest. Have a good Sunday.